There's a fascination about Egypt, a glamour, a romance. On my trips, people tell me they've been dreaming of traveling to Egypt since early childhood. There are other wonderful sacred places in the world: Gothic cathedrals, Mayan pyramids, Islamic mosques, Hindu and Buddhist temples. But there is nothing anywhere that matches the grandeur, power, and perfection of Egypt. Yet unless you see Egypt through symbolist eyes, you've not seen Egypt at all. One wonders how people come back from Egypt and live lives the way they lived them before, wrote Florence Nightingale back in 1850. The answer is, they don't. 2 weeks in Egypt and you will understand the difference, finally, between true civilization and progress. Just remember, if you don't see Egypt through symbolist eyes, you don't see Egypt at all.
So I looked out of the window, and there they were, the amazing pyramids. Next morning, bright and early, we got up and headed off, and there it was, the world's most famous statue. You really could get a sense and a feeling for the beauty and the absolute magnificence of these monuments that have fascinated people for so many thousands of years. But this trip was totally different from the typical tourist trip. Our host was John West. John won an Emmy for his documentary about the Sphinx a few years back. John's what you call connected. He was able to get us actually into and right next to the Sphinx, so we had a front row seat and could actually walk in, walk through it, and actually touch the Sphinx, which most tourists never get even close to. What a wonderful place to be. Notice a pause here. It's really made a big impression on me. But I was able to walk through and just see the whole thing. So this is what you're able to see, as if you were able to poke along and see something that has existed for, well, when we got into it, we could see, as John pointed out, the weathering shows the Sphinx is much, much older than people suspect.
Look down this way. You see that this is the original line of the actual enclosure wall. You see that it's a straight line, right? It goes all the way down there. So you've got about 5.5 feet of sheer weathering that has weathered this wall back from its original line here. This is a big question. This doesn't happen overnight. There it is.
Yeah, exactly. You can't dispute it. Yeah.
And go explain the weathering.
Well, if you look at this from the American Southwest, I know that this just for sandstone, this takes thousands and thousands of years, and particularly in a dry climate. Of course, Egypt is much more than the Sphinx. Right next door at the Sphinx Temple, we can see some of the other evidence of this early megalithic state. The idea that Egypt was actually a legacy from a prior civilization. Look here. They baffled the corners. Instead of having a right angle, they went through incredible extra effort by hand to carve out little corners around and edges in here. And the idea is, this is way beyond our sophistication and understanding today. The idea is this would actually contain the energy or whatever they were creating in that room. All this granite was quarried in Aswan, about 600 miles south. This is the famous unfinished obelisk. Get an idea of how they actually built these things. Look at the channel carved right out of solid rock. How did they do that? Take a hard stone and keep pounding and pounding away. See the channel here? How they got underneath this? Nobody knows. But just imagine, this is a 1,200-ton piece of stone that they're taking out completely by hand. I don't know if there's even a crane in the whole world that could lift this. So then we walked away from the Sphinx complex towards the pyramids. And as you can see, there's just treasures and things all over the place. The sheer scale and the size, and I don't know if it's the energy or what you want to call it, but there certainly is something about these incredible structures that have drawn so many people for so long. Again, the huge rocks and the stones for the precise fitting and putting all these things in by hand and carving them and carrying them. You wonder, why did they do this? When they found this boat buried in the sand next to the pyramids, it completely threw out the notion that these were some dumb, simple primitives who happened to build these buildings because they liked the sun. This is a sophisticated ocean-going vessel. The technology was not improved until just fairly recently. But not only that, it was loaded with symbolism that we saw all throughout Egypt.